How you
Hold on a
doing?
sec. Uh, Anthony, so good to see you. It's amazing. We've been trying to set this up for quite some time.
Yes, thank
So
you for your
yeah,
patience.
no problem. It's been a while, and I'm excited about season 3.
Thank you.
Um, and so I've got a bunch of questions. Some of them are crowdsourced from very dear fans, and my first question, just of my own curiosity, what is your point of view on tribbles?
Ha! They're, kind of cute, but they're pretty problematic. So, I don't know if it would ever be possible to have them around without them turning into a disaster.
Yeah, there's I spoke with David Gerald, who
Mhm.
invented them,
Mm.
and there's a bit of a controversy saying he actually stole the idea from some pulp sci-fi of the early 1900s. But yeah, probably a big problem. So let's delve right into the questions. I have a very dear friend named Brittany in Detroit. So I've seen you and Wilson in Rent years ago. I can definitely say that I prefer a smaller venue. The film turned it into a much bigger production. My dear friend Brittany in Detroit asks what it was like to go back to the cast and songs in the film roughly 10 years after the debut. Was it like home? Did it make you love the character even more or less? Uh,
Yeah, it was very much like going home. So uh, we started in 1996. I was in it for about 2 years. And then it was really, yeah, it was only about 6 years after that the film was made. But by that point, it seemed like it wasn't going to be likely that any of us from the original cast were going to be part of it. It felt like, so as so often happens when there are Hollywood adaptations of shows like that they don't use anybody from the original cast. It's almost never done. There's a tiny handful of films that have used anyone from the original cast, let alone
yeah.
6 of us. So when it turned out that 6 of us were going to be a part of it, it was a tremendous, it felt like a miracle. It felt like the hugest gift. And that we had the chance to do our best to bring the kind of core source of what we created to life on camera for all time. Theater is amazing. It is my preferred venue. And one of the things I love about it is that, if you're in the theater that night, and I'm in the theater the night, only those of us who were there the night had that particular experience. But there's also something amazing about film and television, which is that it lasts forever. So to get to be a part of both versions was incredible and a huge surprise. So yeah, it was amazing, and it was also wonderful that the film introduced so many more people to the show, and then it brought people back to see the show. So it's like one of those things that keeps the legacy of Jonathan Larson's
Yeah.
work alive.
I'm very glad about that. As I mentioned, it was a small show when I saw it on Broadway. I One of the extras was actually busy cleaning up stage afterwards. It was
Hmm.
clear you were using. It was a friendly thing, and I do think these big theater productions sometimes. Like Blue Man Group, everybody around in the middle of the country is used to seeing them in arenas, but they're made for a small village stage.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so next question. Yeah, it seems that at least half of the characters of Star Trek have been musically inclined. Picard plays his flute from that famous episode, The Inner Light. Riker has his trombone, and besides Wilson Cruz, who else on the cast of Star Trek Discovery has a good singing voice or musical talent? And will there be a karaoke night sometime on the show?
On the episode or in our lives off the
No,
camera?
chance to explore musical talent.
I would love to. I mean, there's that little moment in season 2 when Tilly and Stamets sing a little bit together. But yeah, Mary has a nice voice. Sonequa has a nice voice. What's funny about Sonequa's voice is that sometimes she sings really high in a way that it's like her speaking voice isn't that high, but when she sings, sometimes she can get really high. And her husband Kenrick can sing really high, which is really, so they have these contests to see who can sing higher. Doug has a nice voice. I don't know if you saw the Carpool Karaoke episode. It was Mary, Doug, Sonequa, and
No,
myself.
I've seen a bunch of Doug stuff though. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a number of us who can sing. I believe that Ian Alexander and I certainly, yeah, Blue sings. I'm pretty sure that Ian sings too. I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm not sure about David Ajala. I'm not sure we've gone into the realm of finding out whether he can sing or not. But there are a number of people who can sing for sure.
Great. And any who play instruments?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean it's not true.
Right. So about Ian and Blue, have you taken over a mentoring role in the show towards any of these folks?
You mean behind the scenes?
Yeah.
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, so I was there on Blue's very first day that they ever set foot on a professional film or television set. That, you know, they just graduated from drama school like weeks, like maybe 6 weeks before coming to set. And I was with Jonathan Frakes, who directed that episode, and we both were looking at the monitor, watching Blue work, and we were like, how is this possible that Blue is so incredible right away, having never had this experience before? And yeah, so from that moment, I felt like in a way kind of taking Blue under my wing a little bit. And it's been one of the most special aspects of this whole experience of being a part of Discovery is getting to know Blue and getting to kind of feel like I'm, I don't know, helping, you know, prepare them for everything that's coming their way. And I mean, I don't need to teach Blue anything about work. Blue is an amazing actor and consistently brings it. But in terms of, I can kind of mentor in terms of the business and the, you know, the media and the PR and, you know, all that kind of side of things, and be like a sounding board for any questions that they have.
Yeah, so I had a set order for questions, but we're just jazzing on to things that are in a certain order. You talk about acting as business. As you know, I am, in addition to being a pop culture critic, I'm a disability rights advocate. And there are a lot of us in the disability community who are creators. I've written books and reviews and things. There are puppeteers, actors, you name it, set designers, both behind and in front of the scenes. We want careers in the acting world. Unfortunately, getting hired has been somewhat of an issue. It's the final barrier of discrimination in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
What tips do you have for disabled entertainers and artists who are hoping to get through?
I don't know if I have tips per se, but I mean, I think there's some encouraging signs, like Ali. I'm
Stoker, I think.
Stroker, thank you. Winning the Tony, being first of all being cast in Oklahoma, and then being brilliant in it, and then winning the Tony shows that there is, you know, that there are cracks that disabled actors can, you know, peer into, but it does require the people on the other side being willing to see the possibility and being willing to understand that they might have had blinders on, and that they need to open their eyes to and minds and hearts to this possibility. So I know that Ali, though, I actually first met Ali. She was a student at NYU, and my friend Michael McElroy runs the department, and I came in as kind of a guest teacher, and she was in that class, and she was, you know, fantastic. But it also required her saying, I want to be in this space, and I'm going to demand that I take up this space.
Right.
So it's like, which is a tall order, and understandably could be incredibly intimidating, because it's not like there's a lot of evidence that that could be possible. So it's like both things have to happen, that people in the disabled community have to say, I want this, and be willing to sort of knock down some doors, but at the same time, the people on the other side have to open those doors. So it's like both and I think that we're starting to get to a point with everything else that's changing, that more doors are opening, but there's still a very long way to go.
So in terms of opening those doors, a few years ago, I heard of the idea of inclusion riders. You know, it was started out basic with African Americans being included. Basically, the idea being that when you sign a contract, you can insist that diversity talent be hired as well. Do you think that has a good role with the hiring disabled talent?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's like the kind of thing like, people get so worried about the idea of like quote unquote quotas, like that's somehow problematic, but sometimes you do have to insist on these things as a place to start, because until you have that place to start, you're not even going to be aware that it's been not even that it,
Yeah.
people aren't even aware that it's not happening. They're so blind to it. I think that's largely it. It's not even that people are in the room saying we will never do this. It's just that they haven't even seen that it's possible. So sometimes, yeah, having it in a rider says, okay, now you really need to find these people and you really need to shake the tree and open these doors for them.
Yeah.
Unless they were compelled to do it, it wouldn't even occur to them. So it's a funny thing. It's not even that necessarily that the casting directors or producers or directors are anti this. It's just that they haven't been asked to do it or tasked with doing it.
There are a lot more extreme disability activists who, for very good reasons, have chips on their shoulders, and they think that casting directors are intentionally trying to exclude us. I think it's what you say, that it just hasn't occurred to them yet.
I mean, there may be some for sure. I mean, we all know that there's certainly people who are act in bad faith. I mean, that is certainly possible, but I don't think it's across the board.
Right. Okay. So I want to move on to another question here. So the Star Trek, let's go back to diversity. Star Trek has promoted diversity since the very, very beginning. I'm remembering in the very first pilot episodes of the original series, the women wore pants. Women weren't even allowed to wear pants in the workplace back then.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the episode "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield," in which a character that is half white and half black displays overwhelming bigotry towards a character who is half black and half white, making a
Yes.
mockery of the racism that was very much legalized in half of the U.S. at the time. Then there's, of course, your relationship with Wilson's character, Dr. Culber, on screen. It's very groundbreaking. And there's evidence that Gene Roddenberry, sorry, this is a bit lengthy, wanted the original Sulu to be gay. And he was so frustrated by the studio's unwillingness to add a homosexual regular character to the next generation that he slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "It's the fucking future. No one gives a shit if they're gay." That's Gene Roddenberry's point of view on it. How do you feel about Star Trek's continuing role in promoting diversity and acceptance?
Well, it was absolutely part of Gene Roddenberry's initial notion, was that he wanted to present a unified crew that had people from all backgrounds coming together for a common good. And yeah, so it's animated, it's in the DNA of Star Trek. So it was only natural that Discovery followed in those footsteps and center the story of a Black woman, for instance. And then have openly gay characters. The stuff about the gay characters in Next Generation, Jonathan Frakes has shared also that among the cast and among there were many people involved who were frustrated by the lack of LGBTQ representation, and they were agitating for it. And yeah, it was the networks who were balking at it. So yeah, I think it's a little bit, it's sad that it took this long for characters like Stamets and Culber and now Adira and Gray and Tig's character Jet Reno to be a part of the Star Trek pantheon. But at the same time, I'm incredibly proud that we get to carry that mantle together.
Yes. And it's also striking me that the studio, the production companies are now turning into our biggest allies in that matter.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's like with, social change, it just takes a long time. And it's like that tipping point has to happen. And then once it happens, like in a very pretty closely contested election in the United States, there was a state, Nevada, that by, I think it's around a 60% margin, 60-40, enshrined same-sex marriage in their state constitution. They're the first state to do that. There are laws for it, but it's not quite the same thing as enshrining it in the constitution of the state. So that, and you know, it's not that long ago in the last 20 years where that never would have happened in terms of public opinion. So these things, you know, the arc of, as the arc of history bends towards justice, but sometimes that arc takes a while.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled with that. Georgia, which has been firmly a red state before, and it's somebody commented, okay, all these so-called red states. Imagine if voter suppression hadn't been going on in areas like that, you know.
And we have Trek fan extraordinaire Stacey Abrams in large part to thank for what's happening in Georgia.
I also want to put a shout out to my friend author Vicky Bertali, who's been very big in promoting liberal causes in Georgia. Let's see. Okay, we talked about disability. On a related note, there is a disturbing amount of Star Trek fans who think that Star Trek is about militarism. You learn it's about diplomacy. I mean, basically Starfleet's missions are, I love that moment in Star Trek Beyond when Scotty says Starfleet is not a military agency. I was posting that on Facebook every day for about a month, you know. The thing is that Starfleet is about exploration first, diplomacy second, and military a deep third. So, what do you think about you know the misinterpretation there?
I mean, understandable. It's understandable to some degree because there is, you know, it's inspired by the Navy in terms of its nomenclature and structure, you know, power structure within the ship. So, and there certainly are, you know, we are armed and we do have phasers and, you know, photon torpedoes and those things. So you have to be capable of, but it's more like it's a peacekeeping force, really. You know, Starfleet wouldn't necessarily declare war. It would defend a people who were under attack, but it wouldn't go out and you know, rattle sabers. So yeah, I mean, but there are space battles have been a part of Star Trek from the very beginning. So I understand it to some degree, but yeah, I think the primary mission absolutely is exploration.
I think they're just missing the primary mission there. And also, Gene Roddenberry himself was a socialist humanist. You know, he was not a conservative person. So so anyway, there's some more specific questions about the speaking of acceptance and social justice, just a note from my friend Wendy. She would like to remind you that when you were playing Hedwig at the Hartford stage, you met a young woman in a wheelchair named Tammy, and you made her life feel very valid, and she still has a picture of you two together on display. Wendy would like to thank you because your act of kindness gave Tammy a much needed boost to her self-esteem.
That's fantastic, thank you.
So, okay. So, here's a big question. A lot of people are up in arms about Discovery not looking exactly the same as the original series. What they neglect to remember is that the original series was horrifically underfunded, that the sets were often made out of things like plywood and string. The actors were casts off from failed westerns and police dramas, and ship models were often repurposed children's toys. The Planet Killer, for God's sake, was a windsock dipped in concrete. What do you say to those who take up issues with Discovery not exactly resembling the original series?
I mean, I get it. I understand to a certain extent people, you know, wanting to hold on to precious memories, and so I don't begrudge them that. But at the same time, yeah, we're making a show that's with 21st century technology. There's no reason we can't find ways to honor some of the aesthetic, but also bring it into the modern day. So I believe that our designers have consistently done a beautiful job of doing that. You know, our communicators from the original, from the first couple seasons, and tricorder and phasers, they were all absolutely based on or around the original series designs. So that there's a tremendous amount of love for what came before among our designers. Believe me, they study it, they deep dive into it, they know every dimension of it, and then they find ways sometimes to update it, but trying to strike a balance. And I mean, one of the great things about season 3, I think from their perspective, is now they're free of the chains of that and can really let loose their wildest dreams of how they envision what things can look like, in the far future. But I think they also had a really good time finding ways to walk the line in a really creative manner. I think that the Enterprise at the end of season 2, I from what I saw, I think that people were pretty happy with how it walked the line. When you finally got to the Enterprise bridge, it was like, okay, yeah, that it looks recognizable, but it feels modern in a way that honors both.
I just think some people just like to pick problems, and I'm like, then they're watching the wrong show. Yeah. So yeah. So okay, so let's see. We should have uh on a more personal note, what would you say to LGBTQ individuals who are having a tough time with acceptance with friends, family, and community?
Well, I mean, I would say it's the cliche, but it gets better. Do whatever you can to find a community, and thankfully, for better or for worse, we have the internet, but the internet, I think, in many ways can be for better in terms of
Yeah.
trying to find community, safe spaces where you can be seen and known as your fullest authentic self. There are plenty of resources out there too that are free to look to for support, so you do not have to undergo any struggles alone. So yeah, Google is your friend as far as that's concerned. And when it is possible for you to, in COVID times it's harder, but when it is possible for you to gather in person in safe spaces, that's even more empowering. So yeah, find ways to stay safe and take care and self-care as best you can.
I agree it gets better because I was, not just I didn't know I was gay until about age 21, but due to disability issues, I was bullied mercilessly when I was younger and even up through community college. And so glad I got to a four-year school after that. Basically, uh, there were even people, who were beating me, and now I'm interviewing you, and so I think it is cliche, but yes, it does get better. And we were talking about safe spaces and making contacts, and I do believe that if you hang out with common interest groups and things like that, and then have the, pardon me, the cojones to ask those people to hang out with you on their downtime, you can make some really wonderful friends and support networks.
Absolutely.
So let's try to get more into the show. There's a metaphor, they say, that the crew of Discovery is an extended family. How can we apply what Discovery has shown us to our own family lives and friendships? And are there any specific examples, such as your character Stamets' relationship with Tilly, or any other examples from Discovery?
Well, I mean, one of the things that happened in the most recent episode of Discovery, in episode, where are we up to? 4? Tilly and Stamets had a little, a little conflict, and it hurt.
Yeah.
Tilly was very hurt by what Stamets said to her, and Stamets wasn't fully aware of it. It was, one of those moments that happened, and Stamets wasn't, present to the harm that was caused. And then, what I think that we can take from what happened after that was that they had it out and they talked through it, and Stamets really apologized, sincerely apologized, and Tilly accepted the apology. But it took work. It wasn't just sort of like snap your fingers and it's over. So, and similarly, other aspects of other things that bubbled up between the family, but there was then a moment of coming together and understanding that the bond between us far exceeds any strife between us.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's a beautiful example of what's possible through communication and taking responsibility and talking through things.
I'd like to note that I have had similar issues with my friends and family. Right now, my brother and I are on the outs, but I think that communication is key, and getting through these things is really, really wonderful. Now, Han, we've got a chat. So anyway, let's see. Uh, uh, yeah, there's only really two more questions. Who have you found the most supportive and encouraging with your career?
Well, I mean, my mom, my late mother, I couldn't have done any of it without her. I started as a child. Uh, my mom was a nurse, single mother nurse of my brother, sister, and myself, and she was a nurse at a summer camp, and it was at the summer camp when I was 6 years old that I did my first show. The three of us went along just to be campers while she worked at the camp, and while I was there, I auditioned for a show just cause, I don't know, and had a great time. Went back the next summer, did two more shows, and started doing community theater in and around Joliet, Illinois, where I grew up, and then started doing professional theater when I was 9. I couldn't have done any of that without her. So she didn't know anything about showbiz. None of us did. But she listened to people who encouraged her to take me to Chicago to get professional work. Um, and so she drove me up for things when she was on off hours from her job. I mean, yeah, to say that she was my biggest supporter would be the hugest understatement in the world. None of this would have been possible without her. And then I've had, Michael Greif, who directed the original director of Rent, on Broadway, has been a consistently huge supporter. I've worked with him a number of times over the years in either productions or readings. I've assisted directed him. He's been a steady and constant supporter of mine.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. I also wanted to know, more of a note than a question. There are many suspicions that Sylvia Tilly is that her character is autistic, and that we're kind of waiting for a revelation, and hopefully, but or at least we do get to identify with her, much as many of us identified with Data, or the
Yeah,
blind community identified with Geordie.
right.
Star Trek is finding yourself in the crew, and
Yeah.
yeah. So then, of course, the last question: if you, Anthony Rapp, found yourself thrust 950 years in the future, what would you hope the world would be like? And if you can think of some basic steps to help us achieve those goals.
My goodness. I mean, I hope that by then we would have solved many problems the way that, Star Trek envisions it, that divisions around race, religion, class, sexual orientation, gender identity were gone. That there was simply room for everyone to be themselves without that being a source of conflict. That equity existed. That all people had access to an equally opportune future. And then I would hope that climate change and that humanity had done everything it could to preserve the planet instead of destroy the planet, the natural resources, and if that included then colonization of other planets and terraforming of other planets, which is certainly possible, that would also always be mindful of protecting natural resources and beauty and natural beauty, and finding ways to live in harmony with the environment, and not,
So
as the steward of the environment, not just the master of the environment.
as I was discussing with someone else earlier, I went to the Kennedy Space Center a couple of years ago, and I asked, so big question is, when are we getting to Mars? And they said, if everything goes as it's going right now, and I've kept updated with this, we, according to NASA's current schedule, will be on Mars and back by 2035. That's freaking
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and the thing about so much of this, I had the chance to go to NASA Ames in Palo Alto, or in Mountain View, California, and had some amazing conversations with them. There's so many still difficulties with it. Among them, when human beings are in space, there's all kinds of radiation that they don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen. Like, it's a long journey to Mars. They don't know when you're that far in deep space what that might do to humans, how it might affect them. There's lots of questions, but they are absolutely on the trajectory to getting us there. I don't know, I got to plug one of my favorite all-time trilogies, the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson, that does an incredible job of extrapolating what colonization of Mars might look like from a political, socioeconomic, environmental standpoint. It's incredible exploration of the possibility of starting fresh in a new place, what that might be like, and also what the inherent pitfalls and problems might be.
Yeah. So here's a one last question added on. I'm stealing this from my friend David Zimmerman. What makes you really happy, satisfied, content?
Justice makes me really happy. When something that has been long needed happens to make the world a more equitable, fairer place, that makes me very happy. Kindness makes me very happy. Time with my loved ones, whether it's my fiance or my family, my cats, my cast members. Time spent doing something that we really enjoy makes me really happy. Reading a good book makes me really happy. Um, those are some of the things, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Anthony, I wish you and your fiance the best of luck. Thank you so much for stopping by. It's been amazing. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Live
Okay,
long and
take care.
prosper.
Live long, I can't quite, but yeah, live long, prosper. Okay, take care.